Madam, your country was under fire on today, Council Minister in Luxembourg, because of the state aid for the German companies, 200 billions. And your partner, they say it's not fair because the business company, German companies will be favorized in the European market, having in mind that the other poorer country, they have not so much possibility to help their own companies. So it's about solidarity. What's your answer?
Well, first of all, we're in Germany currently not talking about state aid to the companies. That's not what this big package is about, but it's about helping the consumers, particularly those ones that are vulnerable, the ones that are worried now, how are they going to provide energy to their families over the winter, to help them with the high and exploding energy costs that are due to Putin's war on Ukraine, right? So that is what we're talking about, and many other EU countries have done the same already since quite a long time actually. They are providing support to the electricity consumers so that they can afford the prices, and the package that we're talking about in Germany at the moment, it sounds like a very big amount, but then you have to take into account that the German economy is larger than most in Europe, and that also this amount is to be spent over a couple of years. Plus, we're trying to find measures to bring down energy prices in the EU as a whole, and therefore then we will actually not even need this amount of financial support to families.
The other question, because your partner, some diplomats said that Germany is showing middle finger to the others in the EU, is because of your opposition to the price cap for gas. So why you're opposing the price cap?
Well, most countries that are opposing price caps are the ones that are importing a lot of gas because the people are afraid that if you impose a price cap on gas, then those selling gas will say, well, then we sell somewhere else. So for us, we don't want to risk that less gas reaches the EU, and that is one reason why we don't think at the moment that this is a good policy measure. But, however, speaking of solidarity, we need to use the market power we have in the EU, and actually also in the European energy community, where North Macedonia is also part of, to buy together gas and then negotiate with the sellers better prices. So I think we definitely need to do that. Plus, I can only tell you that we wouldn't be in this mess if we would have earlier started with a transition to renewable energies and to green energies. Because what we see at the moment now is that the cheapest form of producing energy in Europe is renewable energy. It's wind power, it's solar power, it's hydropower, and that is because these forms of energy are not dependent on some sort of market price that is determined on a global market that can be influenced by somebody like Putin, but the sun always shines, the wind always blows without a charge, right? So we can use this, we can harvest this and produce cheap and affordable energy for our citizens.
Talking about the energy prices, are you going to support Macedonia's intentions to buy electricity from Bulgaria for privilege price? Bulgaria is waiting for a green light from the European Commission.
Well, I hear that there are negotiations happening, and I think that we really need to stand together in solidarity on this issue. At the moment, there are still discussions going on at various levels, so it's too early to comment on it. But we definitely here currently at this conference that I'm at in Skopje, the Green Agenda conference, we're working a lot on supporting North Macedonia and other countries in their transition also to renewable energies. For instance, we've spent billions of euros already in supporting North Macedonia in energy transition and building wind parks, in reducing energy consumption through better insulation, for instance, and we intend to continue that.
Talking about the green agenda, what's the fate of the green agenda, having in mind that Macedonia as well as the other countries should use much more coal this year?
Well, we have this problem in the whole of Europe that due to the stop of Russian gas supplies, we have for a year or two we have to use more coal. Unfortunately, it's not very good for the climate, not very good for the air quality in our cities. But this has to be a short-term interim solution. In the medium and long term, we really need to have a fast transition to renewable energy because that's the only way we can ensure an energy production that's not only cheap and affordable, but that also doesn't pollute the air, that people and particularly children are not affected from bad air quality, and that doesn't harm the climate.
Madam, how you define the German interest in the Western Balkans?
Well, we have a great interest in the Western Balkans. We've mentioned the Western Balkans as an important topic in our coalition agreement of the current government. We've appointed a special envoy for the Western Balkans, and it's in our vital interest that the countries of the Western Balkans become a member of the European Union. They are part of the European family already. They need to become part of the European Union for our own also stability, for the interest of stability, freedom and prosperity of the people living here. So we're a very strong supporter of this.
The EU is main, at least still yet, the main objective for the Western Balkans, although we are witnessing a dramatic decrease of the support for EU integration, and it's because of the lack of visibility of the EU integration in Macedonia as well as in the other countries in the region. We see, for example, Montenegro and Serbia negotiating for years and made just few steps forward, but still far from joining the European Union. Is there any idea how to deal further with the region and to stop this trend of decrease of the support for EU integrations?
Well, we have currently started now again the Berlin process, for instance, that helps regional integration here in terms of the market, in terms of the green transition towards renewable energy, and we intend to use this process that will have a set of meetings with including a summit in Berlin to also produce tangible results for everyone on the ground. And already the EU support to countries here in the region is really tremendous. I mean, I've only looking at North Macedonia. We have, as EU, already spent billions of euros to support only in the field of energy transition, of building of cheap and clean energy sources for the future. We will continue support when it comes to modernizing the public administration, reducing corruption, in all sorts of fields. So we are really committed to working together, to also investing. And we maybe also need to become better in also talking about it.
Mm-hmm. EU is helping also the countries in Africa or in other continents, but still the question is, what about the prospect to join European Union? Could we expect to see some political will, as we saw, for example, in the late 90s, when it was a strong decision to integrate, at that time, so-called PECOS country from Eastern Europe?
Well, we have seen quite a lot of progress when it comes to enlargement this year. I mean, we have started now the intergovernmental conferences, the accession negotiations with North Macedonia, with Albania. Just now in July, I attended these events myself. I was very proud to be there because it's clear that these countries, that North Macedonia deserves to become a member of the European family, and it was very clear that the EU wants North Macedonia to be part of its union with all parts of its identity. We heard Macedonian being spoken in the EU buildings during this conference. So it's very clear to me that this process that finally now started in July is for me, a very clear support that the EU is not only talking about enlargement when it comes to Western Balkans, but actually puts also some action on the ground. And we are very keen to push this forward. This includes also additional steps this year, like visa liberalization for Kosovo, for example, and for making progress now in the individual points that are needed for becoming an EU member. And here really we need to come to a point where the countries that want to join the EU have the pace of the process in their own hands, because in the end it really depends on, also for the sake of the people, it depends on progress, for example, in judicial reform and these kind of things.
That's the question, because when I mentioned this period in late 90s, when there was a strong will, political will in the EU, when the German Commissioner Verheugen led the process of enlargement, there was a heavy engagement of the EU in order to reform Eastern European countries to push the reform processes, which is to push the case in the Western Balkans. But we see, for example, the new methodology was adopted 2 years ago. No trace of the new methodology within the negotiation process with Montenegro and Serbia, for example.
Well, I actually see quite an engagement of the EU. It's maybe also because I am heavily engaged, and clearly the German government is heavily committed to making this work also as fast as it can work. As I said, we have seen progress now with the start of the accession negotiation with North Macedonia and Albania. We are seeing progress now during the fall, where we convene the Berlin process again, that will make progress when it comes to regional integration as well. So we are moving. In some countries in the region, the process is not as fast as it could be because governments are blocking necessary reforms. No? I mean, it is very clear that, and also
in which countries, for example?
One key criteria, for example, is alignment, of course, of the foreign policy with the EU standards of foreign policy. And if we're looking to Serbia, indeed, then we see some question marks, and it's very clear that the way into the EU doesn't lead via Moscow. So here we clearly see when once the political, if there's not enough political will, then also progress is not fast.
What about Macedonian government? Is there any reform that are that you see that some political will is missing in order to be?
I've seen a very clear determination of the political will of the North Macedonian of the government of North Macedonia now since I came into office and since this government came into office, which coincided nicely. That it's very clear that this government is very committed to joining the EU, and indeed the next steps are also reforms when it comes to anti-corruption, reforms when it comes to the judiciary. That is very clear, and that's also important for the sake of the people. I heard that there are opinion polls that only very few citizens here trust the judiciary. So it's very clear that, and it's not only for the sake of EU membership that it's necessary to have reforms here.
How do you comment the comment of the cynic? They say EU is pretending that is integrating the Western Balkans countries, and the Western Balkans countries are pretending that they negotiate for membership.
That's not what I've seen now during the time I was in office. I've seen people and I've seen governments that are committed to the EU process. We are here really in a region that is really in the middle of Europe. No? I mean, for me, there is no alternative but to work together and to integrate further together.
Macedonia started negotiations, but also it's in some midway to negotiation process. So we are missing the necessary majority to change constitution, which was planned with the so-called French proposal. There is a strong opposition. And are you going to meet the leader of the opposition and to talk about those necessary steps in order to start the negotiation process?
Well, this time I'm only here for a relatively short time period, mainly for this conference on the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans. So I'll only have very few meetings on the side. But my message is very clear that the offer to continue with these negotiations is there. The screening has already started, as it has for Albania, so the process is happening. And the prospect of EU membership has never been that much in reach, I think.
There was a TV debate a few days ago. The main question was when we could become a member state. What would be your answer if you would participate in this debate?
Well, that depends on the progress in reforms.
Well, of course, it depends on progress and reform. But what would be your?
Yeah, that's exactly why
you follow the dynamic of the processes.
Yeah, indeed, and I don't think it's that far away. But I think it's very difficult to speculate about specific.
Again, there was a. In 90s and beginning of the 2000s, there was a date which was defined by European Council when the Eastern European will join EU. We are still missing this date. That's it.
Yeah, that's
in a way it shows that it's illustrating the political will within EU.
I wouldn't say so, because the process is very clearly defined with reform steps that need to be taken, and the political will, particularly in this geopolitical setting, I think has really become more firm, and the German government will really do all we can to support the countries on their way into the EU, and for me, it's really, in these days, it's really, we can see there is a question of whether you want to join the side that works for freedom, for democracy, for freedom of expression, for prosperity, or the side that doesn't care much about the welfare and benefit of their own people. That's the kind of geopolitical setting we're living in. The last time I was here, there was still before Putin started his brutal war on Ukraine, and I think that has changed a bit the urgency and the seriousness of this debate.
When you mentioned the values, we see the huge wave of so-called illiberal autocracy. And the ideology that opposed some of the very basic value on which European construction was funded. So how to stop them?
By being good democratic governments. I think that's in the end what people care for, that they have leaders that care about governments, that care about them, that care about bringing electricity, allowing them a decent living, good infrastructure. And if these conditions are set, then I think those that want to sow differences and want to spread illiberal values don't have...
Macedonian government is not on the good track, having in mind it's not able to provide such a benefit for the citizen of Macedonia.
Well, I think that's the core task for all governments, to work very hard and do all we can to provide a good context for citizens. Of course, the circumstances sometimes are adversary. The German government also just started a year ago, And we are found now in a situation that no one would ever have imagined. No? The energy supply has stopped from Russia, and that really brings a lot of German companies into...
Yeah, but you have 200 billion in order to help the consumers.
Difficult, yeah.
Which is not the case of the others, including Macedonian government. What about Serbia, madam? Are you going to speed up the negotiation process? Are we going to freeze the process, having in mind the deal between Russia and Russians and Serbians took place in the UN General Assembly?
Well, we have a very clear message towards Serbia, and that message is that at some point there needs to be a clear choice made, a choice towards the EU, towards democracy, towards freedom, or a choice in the other direction. And that choice is in the end only a choice that the Serbian people can make. But we are ready to show that a future within as good parts of the European family is a good one.
But you're repeating this message, but still there is a so-called humanitarian center, Russian humanitarian center in Niš, 200 kilometers north from Skopje. There is this agreement for consultation on how they call this agreement between Moscow and Belgrade. And there is some initiative within the European Parliament to freeze the negotiation. Is there any debate within the EU to freeze those negotiations?
Well, we've made it very clear towards Serbia that part of the accession process to the EU is in alignment with the foreign policies of the EU.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's not a full answer, but okay, I can understand. What about the Kosovo-Serbia relation? Are you going to support kind of a new Republika Srpska, which is a kind of intention of the Vučić government? No. In order to resolve the...
No.
No?
No.
So what's the way to resolve the Kosovo?
Well, Republika Srpska, you're talking about Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yeah, but yeah. Okay, to find a model of the solution which will, which will result with the creation of the kind of a state within Kosovo for the Serbian minority in Kosovo.
Well, I don't think that's currently being discussed. What we support are the efforts by the EU. Representative Lajčák, who is having a very ongoing debates with both sides in the normalization dialogue, and here it's really like sometimes we see 2 steps forward, sometimes we see a step back, but I think that's the only way. The diplomatic discussions, consultations, and making progress to solve this issue between Kosovo and Serbia, and it's also very clear, as the Chancellor recently said in Belgrade, the German Chancellor, that in the end a member of the EU is expected to not have these kind of problems with their neighbor.
Is there any plan, timetable, and talking about this, is there any so-called Scholz-Macron plan? Because we heard many rumors about existing of such a plan to resolve the Kosovo problem.
Well, there was recently indeed there were some trips together of French and German representatives in the region to have discussions, also to prepare for further consultations with both sides, and it's very clear that and I think it's very good if all EU member states, including the French government, is involved here in the region, because that means that we care. That means that we want to work together on a way of solving the remaining issues to clear the pathway for accession for all countries, including Kosovo and Serbia. But in the end, the main pathway to resolving the issues between Kosovo and Serbia are the talks moderated by Mr. Lajčák.
What about the timetable? Because you're repeating the very same phrases that every EU diplomat is saying. But is there any date planned to, timetable? When this question is going to be resolved, or it will continue to be the endless story?
Well, if you ask me, I would say 5 years ago. So again, I mean, that's where we are. We are in diplomacy. We count on the constructive engagement of both sides, and if one side is not willing to engage constructively, then talks stall. And then maybe a few months later, one side is ready to engage, but the other one is not. And then so it's a complicated business. But I think for stability in the region, there is no other way. And it's also an illusion to say, okay, now that someone could come from the outside and just say, okay, now this is how it's done. This is not how politics work. But we need to talk to both sides and find a good way. And I think particularly for the future, look, I'm a relatively young politician, particularly for the young generation, people want to move on. They want to have a decent life here in the region. A lot of them emigrate now to the EU because that's where they find jobs, that's where they find opportunities. And I really want this to change. I want them to have an opportunity in their home countries.
You have mentioned the visa liberalization for Kosovo. Is it going to happen soon?
Yes.
When?
Very soon.
Very soon, okay. And
let me be more precise. This year. This year.
Okay. Thank you. German government is in a way opposing the Open Balkans initiative. You took this initiative as kind of competition to the Berlin process. Are we going to see the Berlin process more concretely, more efficient? In which way and when?
Very soon also.
Yeah.
we will.
What's the plan? What's the plan?
The plan is that we will have a summit meeting of the leaders of the region in Berlin in November. And in preparation for this summit, there will be a range of other consultations with the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, with the Ministers of Interior, and we hope really that in the summit we can achieve two things. One is we will have, or three actually, we will have a very good debate and hopefully progress on the regional market. I mean, that was the big success of the Berlin process a few years ago, that there was a basic agreement. Now it really has to be implemented so that people can benefit from a regional market. And then second, progress on the green agenda, as I was saying earlier, that we really invest a lot in green infrastructure here in the region. And then thirdly, related to that, also the energy security, particularly when it comes to getting through this winter now, to solidarity with each other, in order to jointly get through this rough time. Those are three signals that I expect from this summit.
Tomorrow is a meeting, the very first meeting of European political community. What's your understanding about this new political creation? Is it something that should satisfy the Balkans' aspirations for EU membership, or?
No, clearly not. Clearly not.
Idea?
It's something completely different. It doesn't have anything to do with the accession process. The idea of the political community, and particularly this meeting that is happening now, the first meeting, is basically that we're having an informal discussion of leaders in Europe. It includes also the UK, right, that has recently left the EU and has no intention, as far as I understand, unfortunately, of coming back. So it's clearly not connected to the EU enlargement process in any way. And leaders will discuss now a lot about the common security challenges that we face and the energy topic. So I hope that this, somehow a bit like these G7 and G20 formats, will help us to create an informal settings that leaders can find solutions together.
Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you.